What's up? So, podcast time. I have a list of podcast ideas or video ideas. I had this list for a long time, and I never really did any work in planning or writing a script or ideas on what I should talk about. But I just have this list. The idea behind the podcast is that I can just have an idea and just talk about it. And during the day, I would usually randomly get good ideas. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I could talk about that. And then I'll have a train of thought and I'll go into something else. And I was like, okay, that's interesting. I could talk about that. I can make a whole video, right? And now when it's time to record the podcast, I can't think of shit. So the podcast is shit. Which leads into the first topic that I have on my list, which is podcasts are shit. So I suppose that's where we discuss the topic. And it's hard to deny that some podcasts, at least, are shit. For example, this podcast. It's not meant to be shit, but it's not great, right? It can be interesting. Some people might want to listen to me talk shit. You know, some of the other podcasts have been trying to be a little bit too serious. But I see it as maybe in a few years I can look back at it, be like, oh, that was fun. Look at how I looked at that time, how I sounded. And I kind of remember, it's like storing memories, right? So if I look back at it in 10 years, it'll be like, oh, so that, I remember that happening. Maybe I didn't remember it. And it's like, oh, that's an interesting thought I had at that time. Or I had my podcast I was running, which technically is a show. But, not really a big deal. But it kind of is if you get started and just do something, because a lot of people don't do it. But so anyway, podcasts are shit, right? Aside from this one, I think in general, that might apply to most podcasts. I think the most popular podcast that exists right now is the Joe Rogan Experience, which is good. It's like nice to just listen to some. I listen to some of them. And what I like about that is that it's fun to just talk about anything, especially if it's with friends or people who are experts in something and they have a lot of interesting insights on topics, any topic. Well, this one is solo. I've done a few with people I know, friends, but for the most part, it's remote. And that's a little bit tricky because I have to get a video recording. I need to set up properly. It's easier if you have like a nice studio setup and you just get people to come in, sit down, record. All you have is a microphone and a camera. So that's why I thought it'd just be nice, chill, lay back to just do that. You get a memory of a time when you did something with a friend. And you can look back on it. And that's nice. Even let's say someone dies, you have that recording. You can always go back to it, right? Which is nice to have. I say that I'll go back to it in the future and look back at the videos. But I do listen to them. Well, for now, I listen to it like if I have a long drive and I'm by myself. It's fun to just listen to it over and not so much listen to myself because I don't like to hear myself speak. I find myself kind of annoying when I listen, so I don't know why people would want to listen. But guests, they say some fun things, so I like to hear what guests have to say in the podcast. So if we have a conversation between two people, I would just wait for my part to be done. I don't really say that much, I guess. And then the part where I hear someone respond, it's really interesting. I find that fun, so I like to listen to it. I look forward to, like, let's say I'm going to work and I'm working during the day. I think about, oh yeah, you know what? When I drive home, it's going to be long, but I have a podcast to listen to, and the podcast can be my own, and I already kind of know what it's going to be about. But it's funny sometimes, and it's fun to listen to. But yeah, listen to others too. I really tried to listen to other podcasts, but I can never really follow. It's not like a TV show where you have to watch all of them, which is kind of nice, I guess, but if you don't have to follow every single one, every single episode. Each one is like its own thing. You can just pick up and watch whenever or listen to it whenever. And it's good for driving on long trips or traveling or something. So I see the value in that. But no. So I decided, okay, I'll start a podcast. I will record. I'll buy some equipment, have a microphone, to force myself to continue doing it, because I kind of spent money already on the microphone and the arm and everything. And you have a decent phone. And I'll get a newer one at some point, and it'll be better quality video. So yeah, I can do it. But then so can a lot of other people, and that's where you have podcasters shit, because people try too hard, and it doesn't necessarily have to be good. Sometimes they don't try hard enough, I guess. And like, I don't try that hard. Well, I put some effort, like But yeah, everybody now has a podcast, I guess, basically. So the barrier to entry is low. Everybody has a podcast. Now, defining, let's say, attribute that you need to have a successful podcast is already being well known. So you might not make a breakthrough starting as a podcast now. Maybe it can still happen. But I feel like other people who are celebrities, or like, don't have to be like an A-list celebrity. You can be like, because I guess A-list celebrities don't have podcasts maybe. But someone who has a small, even a small following, they can start a podcast, they can grow, and they can get sponsors. And so yeah, anyone can have a show now. The people who are already popular might have a popular podcast, or increasingly popular podcast over time, build a following and whatnot. It's, I guess, like gold rush, where something new comes out, everyone tries to do it, and some people are successful, but at some point it doesn't really make that much sense. At least podcasts are technically easier to make than like a YouTube video, where you have to have videos and pictures and a lot more interesting things. I don't know if anybody has an interesting podcast to recommend. Maybe I can check it out. But with my time, I could probably do something more interesting. I don't usually, thankfully, have the time to pick podcasts as my number one form of entertainment. It's usually going to be playing a video game, or watching a movie, or watching TV, a TV series or something. Going to the gym, maybe doing martial arts or something like that, like I'm doing right now. Those things take priority in terms of my time. Although I suppose a podcast could be interesting while in the gym. Although I try to focus on my workout. Yeah, it doesn't work. So I don't know. It's kind of like, podcasts are kind of like reading. Like for me, it's a low tier of entertainment, reading. I might rank podcasts higher than reading. Anyway, yeah, in general, podcasts are shit. And I think even good podcasts are kind of shit, right? But watch my podcast still.